back over here real quick. We just had a little thing we wanted to get together here. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this super dynamite call tonight. This is an international call we've been doing this month of November for men around the globe. We start off in England, UK at an 11-hour difference of time zone. It was 1, 2 in the morning there for them to call in. Then also next week we had Mr. Kenji on. We had, we have leaders all over the country. But tonight we're our third part of series. And this young man hails from the Southern California area. He does a lot of business in Southern Cal, throughout the globe, as well as we just opened up Colombia about a little over a year ago. And he's got a large group down there. He's between airplanes and airports quite a bit. We want to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule. He just landed in Southern California. He was in LA, but he flew up to they're having a big expo this weekend in the Monterey Salinas area. You know, that high price dollar area. And I love it. You know, you've seen this young man. He's been featured with Mr. Nectar Island. What's his name, everybody? Who am I talking about? Yeah, that's right. Mr. Les Brown's a dear friend of him. Marvin Sacknam, his list of who goes on and on and on. Mr. Branson. I mean, this young man, we're so glad to have him on the call tonight. And we want you guys, some of you say, what's this all about? What these powerful leaders all around the globe, Mr. Thomas, bring together. Who are they, what they do? Well, tonight, this young man, like I say, hails from LA. He's been around an industry that I'm very familiar with for many, many, many decades. Done very well, trained a lot of people to become very successful throughout the globe. He has an international business. That's powerful, international. You know what? And he's a leader's leader. And I don't use that word lightly because I hate it when I hear leader, but he is a true leader. And I just want to thank him for being on the call tonight. He's going to share some insight, his background. He's going to peel back the onion on who he is, where he started from, and what got him involved with a certain home-based business that just exploded him on a global scale to hang out with such billionaires around the globe. So without further ado, my friend from Southern California, the great Mr. Brian Nelson.
Hello, 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 hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We hear you loud and clear, sir.
Man, awesome, man. I am just honored to be on the call. More than anything else, I'm just blessed to be able to join you guys. And when you asked me to be on the call and speak about global business and just really my story, it's just been a very extraordinary story. You know, it's just been, and when I say extraordinary story, more than an extraordinary story, it's an extraordinary journey. And I want to thank you. I mean, those of you who do not know Mr. Al Thomas, you should, but I'm sure that each one of you do. I have so much reverence, so much love, so much respect, and I have looked up to him for over a decade. To be able to call him, you know, a close friend of mine, a confidant, and somebody who I trust. I would have you guys all clap. So I'm just going to imagine that you're clapping right now. I have a big imagination. So I'm thinking you guys are giving him ovation. In fact, you guys are dragging people off the street to clap for him. In fact, I'm going to get some people. I'll be right back. No, I'm just telling you, he's just that amazing to me. So thank you from the depth of my heart for having me, Mr. Thomas.
You're welcome, sir.
Truly honored. You know, my story is it's no different than any person has had struggles. You know, it comes from a time in which you don't have an identity. I'm from the south side of Chicago, and I know people are from all different parts of the world here. But if you know anything about the United States, it's a war zone. It's a war zone today. It was a war zone there. It's kind of like understanding the struggle of the Middle East or what has happened in Persia. It's not anything that has really changed a whole lot. When you look at what has happened in Israel and you see the fight and the plight that they've dealt with, it's ironic, as I was actually reading today and sharing, because I do a call in the morning at 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. called Scripture and Prayer about Revelations, as it was tapping into Matthew. And that we actually, when you talk about the final days from a scripture perspective, and I don't want to go down a religious path at all, because please, as a disclaimer, I have everything from Jewish, Hasidic Jews, Muslims, you know, Protestants, Gentiles that follow me. And if I say anything that does not align with you, take it as academic. But as I was looking and reading scripture today, it talked about the days of Revelation, which comes about in the closing, you know, the final call. And the final call actually comes from the millennial call, which was actually in Revelations. It was really amazing to me. I'm looking, it's like the last days are the millennial, the light and the close. And I was like, wow. As I started looking at, I was reading the story on the 10 versions, you know, And when you understand it, it's really not about the 10 virgins. It's about from a financial perspective. I'm gonna bring this home for you guys, so you fully understand where I'm going with this. It was about the 10 virgins, but it was about the 5 bags that was given to one of gold, and 2 bags given to another, and 1 bag given to the last one. And it wasn't about who got the most, because the one who got 5 bags doubled their and increased their prosperity. The one that got 2 bags doubled their earnings, and the one that got 1 bag buried it in the sand in the backyard. And it was really speaking on principle. That's where I'm going with this, is the principle that money was not meant to be saved. Money was not meant to be hoarded, that we are responsible with, and it started talking about the talents. Talents is not about the money that was given, it's about the time that we're given here on earth. It's about our resources and what we do with our entire human nature and being on this planet, of being able to double up, multiply our resources to bless other people on this planet. And that's how I was raised. I was raised in a space of a war zone where it's really ironic that I was not in a space that I was either dead or incarcerated, shot up from where I was born. And then you take that place and you move it all the way to Compton, and it was still, you thought it would be better, but it was a lateral move, or I don't know, an ascending move. But as I look at that, there's a sitcom in the United States called The Jeffersons, which their theme as we're moving on up. That was truly my family, because my father had this vision that me and my sister would be the last broke Nelsons in the family tree. He always said that and planted that seed. And as I tell people who have children, things are caught, not taught. Things are caught, not taught. You can teach as much as you want, but it's the things that you do as an example that your children and people around you are going to be able to see. It's the example that we live on a daily basis that allows us to be able to truly evolve and truly move to the next level, because on each new level, there is going to be a new devil, but it's for the people that are truly battle tested, which gives you that testimonial. So as I'm looking at this scripture, I'm looking at how we pour into what we do, how we actually bless other people, how we financially, and I'm thinking, how am I, I was in a space where I had these jobs. I was taught, like everybody, the job thing. I had 2 of them. And then my mentor said, if the first job didn't work, what makes you think the second one's going to help you? He said, it seems like you have big dreams, high dreams, like you want to go to the moon. I said, I do. He said, you want to go to the moon? I said, yes. He said, you're going to need a vehicle. I said, I know, I got one. He said, yeah, your job is like a tricycle, and you just went and bought a second one like it's going to get off the ground. He said, now how stupid is that? And so then I was very aware of what I was not clear on was 2 things. I was not clear on how the world worked, because I lived in a small space. We all come from a space in which we only know our surroundings. So I started to realize that most of the people around me never traveled outside of a 10-mile radius of where they lived. Some people never even get off the block. So I started understanding how small I was thinking, and I started really teaching people that have big dreams, people that think big. The world becomes really small in the 21st century, and people that think small, the world's really big. So it's like I wanted to evolve. I wanted that big dream. I wanted that thought process. I started looking at Steve Jobs. I started looking at Mandela. I started looking at Martin Luther King. I studied under Huey Newton, who was the founder of a movement in the United States called the Panther Movement. I remember going to many of his conversations. I even studied underneath Farrakhan, not someone who I 100% agree with, but have the greatest amount of respect for, because, he's just brilliant. And I started looking at the United States, and I'm looking at how are we the global power, but we are the only country that is supposed to be dominant and the overseer, the mother of over, the direction of which the world goes. But every child, all we speak is one language, but in every other country, everybody else speaks at least 3 languages. That stunned me. I was trying to understand that. And so I started studying different movements throughout all of time. Stalin, You know, you look at past and old. I looked at good and bad leaders. I looked at Hitler and I looked at Mother Teresa. And I'm not taking, and I, you know, I obviously do not agree with Hitler and what he stood for. But what I looked at, what I was looking at, see, if we look at a picture, and I did this as a test for some people that were around me recently, I said, look at that picture and what do you see? One person, as I'm looking at a picture, said, I see red. Another person said, I said, I want you to tell me what color you see. The other one said, I see yellow. The other one looked and they said, I see green. The other one said, you know, I see a lime in the background. I said, man, so you're looking at these, I see wood. I was like, wow. And so they said, well, what do you see? I see nothing but brown. It was just brown. They said, how do you see brown? I was seeing brown in the picture, Mr. Nelson. I said, all I see is the frame, because without it, the picture couldn't stand up. See, based on the trajectory of how you see things, if you may miss the entire structure that holds your vision, that can allow people to see something in a massive way. And in each of these leaders that I speak of, benevolent and malevolent, I learned that it was how they looked at the world and how they saw themselves in it as a person who could direct, who was an orchestra. See, I've had on my email for the last 28 years, I've had, when they first came out and they had, I don't know, some of y'all remember AOL, you know, because if you got AOL in your computer, you couldn't even get out of the computer. You had to buy a new computer. That's how dope and strong-minded AOL was. They put AOL in your computer, you couldn't get it out. You had to buy a new computer to get it out. And so you got mail. And I remember when I put my first signature on it, you know, and I was like, wow. They said you can put your own digital signature and your sign your name on each email. And so I came up because every person, including Napoleon Hill, says, you know, I got a philosophy. And I started learning that everyone that was extraordinary had a personal philosophy. And I said, well, wow, I want a personal philosophy. I want to be great. They said, well, you got to think. I said, what do you mean? They said, that's called critical thinking, something that's profound, that is transparent, that's authentic. It comes with a belief system, Byron. It comes with something that you believe in, something that you could stand on, that makes you stand out, not that makes you extraordinary. It makes your person extra. It means that you do something that is outstanding. You stand out with the way that you think, that others can actually truly walk into and truly follow, something that makes sense, that sound to you. And so I wrote this one sentence and it said, you know, if you want to ever have beautiful music, and if you ever listen to a symphony, and you ever want to see what an orchestra truly sounds like from a Beethoven perspective, and you truly want to create a world that nobody else has ever seen, then you have to be the conductor. But to be the conductor, you have to learn to turn your back on the world. Because if you're paying attention to everything behind you, you'll never be able to have beautiful music. And so in this philosophy that I've lived, where I have learned how, since I was very young, to turn my back on listening to what the masses say, because the classes don't have time to pay attention to the ducks quacking or the excusitis disease that runs rampant like leprosy, or to buy into all the narratives and conversations of opinions of all the flock. And so as I kept going and I wanted to get out of this hood, I wanted to get out of this war zone, and everywhere we went, I just followed my father. And I mean, I have an extraordinary book coming out in 2020 called The Teachings My Father Taught Me to Be a Man and a Leader. They're two totally distinct things. And I wanted to write this book specifically for kids that didn't have a father, because I saw so many lost young men that were out there. And I saw so many mothers having to be the man, which is totally impossible. It's like a man trying to give birth to a child. But to be able to have the principles, universal laws, that 2 + 2 will always be 4 and 4 × 4 will always be 16, that if we can build humanity on a foundation of pure principles, integrity, truth, transparency, forwardness, dreams, an extraordinary spirit, attitude that dictates your altitude, that will give you your longitude, that will give you your destination. I said, if I could do that, then I could possibly be one of these thought-provoking individuals, these forward-leading thought leaders that can make just a dent in what God gave me as a time here on this earth. That if I could just create that one, if I could just be that one pebble that hit the water and it can just ripple out and start to touch lives. If I started to understand the power of a story, and I said, I need to write my story. I needed a story. So I went to one of my people that I called my grandfather. He was a surrogate grandfather. I said, I need a story, Grandpa. I want to change the world. And he looked at me, he said, why do you want to change the world? I said, I want to make a difference. I want to know that my life stood for something. And he looked at me, he said, let me tell you a story. He said, when I started out, I felt just like you. That's why you came to me. Law of Attraction. Go read that book. Let's start there. Why you came to me. The Law of Attraction. He said, you're going to have to become if you look at any great leader, they read. He said, let's start there. Are you reading a lot? You might want to take that down as a note. I said, okay, so I need to read. He said, start with Law of Attraction. He said, you can only attract who you are. He says, you're broke right now. You're going to attract a whole bunch of broke people and they're going to bleed you to death. He said, let's start with that. He said, it's not about the money. See, broke doesn't happen in your bank account. It happens in your bank account because of how you think. You're broke mentally. He says you're broke mentally because you're shattered with your surroundings, which means you're broke emotionally. He said emotions because I said, well, what do you mean I'm broke emotionally, Grandpa? He said, you always tell him about your feelings. He said, do you think anybody gives a damn about your feelings? You always caught up in your feelings. You think I feel like getting out of bed every morning at 4 a.m. to be able to provide for this family? Nobody cares about your feelings. You're broke. You're emotionally broke. You're mentally broke. And because of that, you're financially broke. And based on that, you're going to have stress and anxiety, which means you're going to self-impose physical brokenness on you because you're going to start to get sick because it's going to start to mess with your body. It's like, whoa. I said, Grandpa, was this the story? He said, no, this was the wake-up call. I said, all right. So what's the story, Grandpa? He said, when I was young, I was like you. And I started to change the world. I became great because that's where my focus went. Where your energy goes, your direction flows. He said, so if you focus on that, you're going to end up there. So I started doing that. And then as I got older and I got wiser, and you start to read Proverbs 31 about wisdom and Solomon and the greatest wisdom on the planet, lean not on your own understanding, but on mine, said the Lord. He said, you start to get wiser. If you start to really pay attention, the world starts to shrink. And as I got older, I went from changing the world to saying, okay, I'm gonna make a difference in my country. And I focused on my country, and I passed a lot of laws. I got a lot of legislation in place. And as I got older and wiser, and I got into my 40s, I went from my country and I got to my state. I got to my state, I became governor, and then I got past that and I said, you know what, I just want to work on a local level. And as I got in my 50s, I became the mayor. He said, most people become the mayor before they become the governor. I became the governor and then went to go back and help my city and became the mayor. He said, as I got older and wiser, I just helped my city. I got into city planning. He says, I got older and wiser, I just started helping on the block. I was president of the block that I lived on, helping in my community. He said, I got to 60 and 70, and I just wanted to make a difference with my family. And so I started doing everything with the trust and the wills and setting up life. He said, as I got older and wiser, and I lie here just about to die a few years from now, as I know death is coming clear. He said, I want to make a difference just in my nuclear family and the people in which I actually had avoided and discarded because I had these big dreams and these big goals. And so I never was at home. He said, I was broke. He said, but I was mentally broke. I was time-wise broke. I was emotionally broke. I was not broken, but I was broke. There was a deficit which made me work this in a reverse engineered way. I said, so what would be your advice? He said, start taking over the world with your own. He said, go to the mirror. He said, have you learned how to change your own world? He said, if you truly learn how to change your world, And the greatest investment God will ever give you is in you becoming extraordinary within yourself, honing and developing. In fact, in the prayer of Jabez, it's called the Gimper. The Gimper pays attention to the details, little details, and you're that detail. You're that skill. You are that blessing. You are that angel that was sent as an example. But because you're so focused on what everybody else thinks and how you can help everybody else, and you're sitting up there, you're going to get into a space, and once you try to help everybody, when you need somebody, nobody's there for you. Then you're going to build resentment and then play the blame game. Like, I done given to everybody. Nobody asked you to give. They say on the plane, if you don't put the mask over yourself first, how are you going to help the child next to you? You haven't learned how to take care of yourself. So you got to learn how to be selfish in order to be selfless. And I didn't get that. So my story of not having anything, getting excited about top ramen, appreciating the ice cream man, being able to get excited about getting one piece of bread and putting some cinnamon and sugar on it and eat on that for a week off of one loaf of bread. Being able to truly get excited on scarcity. See, here's a secret about truly understanding wealth and global, because we're going to start with the global, dealing with yourself, because you are the world. As I sat there, I was understanding that, oh my God, I didn't know I was broke until I visited somebody else. I thought everybody I thought I was rich as a child. I thought that everybody had a swimming pool in front of their house. I didn't know you had a whole backyard. My swimming pool was a fire hydrant in front of the house. I thought everybody had a pool like that. It was a community pool. We just open it up in the 102-degree weather. You open up the fire hydrant and you go out there in your underwear and you just, as a child, I didn't know till I visited somebody else's house, you got a real pool. See, my point of the story is, in my evolution and my journey of becoming a boy to a man, everything that I come to know was my internal perception of reality. So perception was my reality, that I was wealthy until I realized I lived in a scarcity mentality of those that surrounded me. I started to buy into the masses instead of understanding the class was already within me. It's not where you live. It's in the third eye. It's in your mind. It's where you're going. It's not where you are. It's where you're going. It's the destination of which you were born. Each one of you were born for greatness. You were born to be able to be stellar. You were born there was not one person that has the same amount of hair on their head. You were born so unique to the rest of the universe. And this takes me into the global conversation. I don't know what the clock is. Where's the clock? Okay, because I have no concept of time. You know what happens when you free yourself? You're timeless. So that's what I'm looking. So I'm with you on that. So I'm like looking, and I started teaching as I evolved, and this wisdom started to kick in. And I look at the global world that we live in today, as we have lived, as I have through the I look at young people on the call, the 45. Do you know what a 45 is? And most would say no. How about a 33? How about an 8-track? How about a cassette? How about a CD? How about a CD-ROM? I mean, you got kids today that are actually putting eggs in the microwave, and they don't even know you're supposed to boil it. It's quite amazing to me how technology and the evolution of time has kicked in, right? But what's really amazing is, look at this stat as I talk about the millennial movement and those that are young and those that we call are old. See, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. What I didn't understand is it took up until from 1 AD to 1975 for over 5 billion people to show up on this planet. Do you understand? We are in the year 2019, just shy of 2020. Less than 50 years has passed, and we're right at the brink of 8 billion people. So it took almost 2,000 years to get 5 billion people here, and less than 50 years to get 3 billion that have just shown up, and we haven't even started yet. So I was sitting back, and do I have 10 minutes, Al? How are we doing, sir? Okay, good. So I was sitting back, and I was having a conversation with some thought leaders the other night, and I said, Who and what is the most powerful country financially in the world today? And I got everybody. I got people said Putin and the Jewish community and Israel and the Persian and well Russia and as they started falling into the trappings of brick, right? The things that they learned in school, you know, not understanding 80% of what you learn in school is not even applied in today's society. And 80% of people that get a degree don't even utilize the degree in which they got it in. So they started living in the brick concept of, you know, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And it's very much in alignment. But I said that was brick. Brick was really, that's called Moore's law, collapsing time frames. I said brick was only good to build the house, and that house was built about 10 years ago. Brick doesn't exist anymore. Just like middle class doesn't exist anymore. Middle class will be in the history books within the next 5 years as an antiquated term of how life used to be. There is no middle class anymore. It's either the have or the have-nots, and I would choose to have. So we're clear. You need to find a way. See, I wasn't taught in school about financial literacy. I was not taught about, you know, residual income. I wasn't taught about equity. I was not taught about compounding interest. I was not taught about how to be able to truly make your time work for you, you not work for your time. I became a leader to teach how I was able in a space where a young Black man from the South Side of Chicago has been in a position to now, because of one decision to change my own life, create in excess of 100 seven-figure multimillionaires is what I live by today, and I have a goal of 1,000 within the next 15 years. See, I think it's much more impressive of what you've done for other people than what you've done for yourself. There's a lot of people that can talk about what they've done, how many millions they've made. First of all, to be able to say you're a millionaire today is like being broke, just so we're clear. Because I'm a millionaire. You're broke? I'm sorry. Because a million is not any money today. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, it meant something. Today, you talk to us, you'd be like, oh, that poor soul. That's sad. I'm sorry to tell you. And so, I mean, but you know, I've been at the top, I've been at the bottom, and my spectrum jumps really fast. Because I can tell you in less than a year, less than a year ago, I was at the bottom. But here's what I learned about making money. It's like tying your shoes. You may trip, but guess what? You learn how to tie them, you can stop, tie them again. You're gonna trip again. You're gonna run so fast that your shoe's gonna come untied again and you're gonna be broke again. You know the average multimillionaire goes bankrupt 2.5 times? A minimum of 2.5 times. So I was like really okay with going broke last year. I just wanted to get the 3 out the way. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it and I asked these people, I said, tell me about the global economy. Who's the most powerful country financially in the world? And people came up with all kinds of names. I said, do you understand there's a little country, it's little, called China. They're out of control. They are so far ahead. I said, but you got to understand the history of how the Japanese tapped into it. The Japanese changed the world by this little thing called the Walkman. You'd have to be old enough to remember the Walkman. That Walkman turned into technology called the Triniton TV. If you remember the Triniton TV back in the early 80s, if you had a TV that could have a VHS in it and it was Sony, they thought you were rich. They're like, oh my God, you got a Sony TV? They had a mentality of living in a state of excellence. So when you look at Hyundai and you look at Toyota and you look at the way that they fine-tuned and started to tap into the importing and exporting, since we're talking about global economies, there's only 3 ways you'll ever get wealthy. Number 1, known as equity. I love equity. That means real property or intellectual property. Now, when I say there's only 3 ways, I'm telling you that everything is given birth from one of these 3 ways, because I wanted to drop some knowledge of something you can keep before I got off. Number 1 is equity, real property, intellectual property. Number 2 is importing and exporting. That's oil, steel, stocks, gold, that's Coca-Cola, that's distribution at its highest level. So we're talking about distribution. Okay, that's the word you want to write down. Number 2 is distribution. Number 3 is my favorite. This is what I teach people and what me and Mr. Al Thomas have been teaching, the layperson, and that's called residual income. There's nothing more gorgeous than residual income. Nothing. When you can work in 2019, 20, and 21, quit, add up 3 years of income, and it's paid to you whether you get out of bed or not. My mentor looked at me and he said, look, you understand residual income. You need to understand it. It taps into compounding interest. It means doing something one time, but getting paid every month on it. He said, let me ask you something. I just look at this. How much do you think it has done in the economy when it comes to just the basic needs? What he meant by that was, he said, do you understand that bread, milk, and eggs have gone up, it's gone up over 500% in the last 5 years. Bread, milk, and eggs. I said, really? He said, let me ask you a question. Has your income gone up 500% in the last 5 years? How about 200%? How about 100%? He said, you know what that is? That's 99% of the people on this planet. That's what happens. They have financial cancer. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, cancer doesn't kill you. Not knowing you have cancer kills you. And catching it too late. He said, you haven't done anything to be healthy. If your money is not growing exponentially, multiplying, 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish. If it's not multiplying, then you're already dead in the water before you even know it. You're going to be caught up on the wrong side of the bell curve. And I said, he started looking at me and said, look at this right now. You look at the Virgin Islands, you look at everything that's happening over in Jamaica, you look at what's happening over in Europe, you look at what's happening in Canada. Do you know in the United States, my sister lives in Beverly Hills, I live in Palos Verdes, 2 of the wealthiest places on the planet. And because you don't move from China to the United States without having money, that you cannot do an LTV of 10%. You cannot just put down 10, 20%. That my sister looked for a house. Her house today is worth well in excess of about $10 million. When she bought it about 5 years ago, it was roughly about 6.5 when she bought it. And it grew exponentially over the last 5, 6, 7 years. In that, it took her 1.5 years to buy the house. You know why? Because the Chinese were coming in and putting down 60% cash. They understood the metals. They understood gold. They understood that cash is king, not credit. Credit you have to have. That's a whole nother conversation. That's another conversation. That's another barometer. That's another ruler that we have to talk about on another night. But being able to become liquid and take that credit and leverage it, to understand what the Yakuza did, what the Japanese taught me. And I actually had a guy who was the head of it, who was one of my mentors. He said, you know, what's wrong with some of it? And he had a candid conversation with me about the minorities of Black people. He says, you know, the problem is you guys don't like to talk about death. He said, but see, if you go anywhere in the world, you can find a Chinatown. Anywhere in the world, you can find it. And you know what you'll find? 4 generations sitting at a table, passing the wisdom on. Now, I don't say this to make a bone about Chinese, Black, white, or anything. I say this to talk about examples that we should learn from that have worked. I can utilize the entire Jewish faith and go into the Hasidic Jews, go into the Torah and teach you exactly how they have learned how to cross-pollinate and do business amongst themselves before they take it out of their community 20 times and it expands. That they move money around, they make sure that the network and the families are all churning the money all in that community before it even leaves the community. So I'm sharing with you that in every culture, like I could talk about soul food for brothers and sisters, each culture has something rich about it. But as we talk about the evolution of economy and the global power of what we're able to tap in today, what I'm here to share with each one of you is, at the end of the day, if you cut each person open, they're going to bleed red. So the greatest leaders on the planet live in the top 3 percentile of money earners in the world. And it's not about how much money they've gotten. I want you to write this down if you're taking notes. It's not about how great they are, how rich they are. It's about servant leadership. The reason why myself and Mr. Al Thomas are so aligned, I had heard about this man for 5 years before, consistently before I even knew who he was. And everybody kept saying, and I didn't know if it was good or bad. They're just like, you sound just like Mr. Al. Are y'all, bro? Do you know Mr. Al Thomas? Your attitude is just like Mr. Al Thomas. I was like, Who is this man? But I learned something. I couldn't go off of somebody else's interpretation of who he was. I had to get to know him himself. And when you know who he is what I live and stand by. He is who I actually bow down to, because he lives in a committed space of serving before he takes anything. When I tell you I am so almost to the point of chills and tears, in awe of how far he goes for every person that screams his name that's in his personal company. He's an example for me. He's one of the very few people I can tell you is one of my closest friends from the furthest point of life. I don't know if you guys would get that conversation. That means you can have somebody you call really close to you that you never see because you revere them so much that you just study their shadow. You study who they are. That is how Kobe took over Michael Jordan. That is how you look at how Michael Jordan took over a Dr. J, for those that understand basketball. It's studying somebody who has already done what you aspire to do, but stays ahead of the pack and doesn't get comfortable with where they are, but consistently evolves into a greater level of servant leadership. And so what this whole conversation is about, what this whole call is about more than anything else, is about how can we serve you? When you look at the people that he has assembled on this call that cover all points of the globe, would you like to do business in Dubai? Would you like to do business in France? Would you like to do business? See, these are all places. See, you need to be well-versed and traveled. You need to see the world. We need to see the world. And we need to be able to collectively collaborate so that we can change the world. Because one man told me the only thing that matters is the dash, not the birth certificate and not the death certificate, but the dash. He said, the only thing that's going to matter after you're buried is what you did with that dash. How much time you were given. The only thing that's in common between man and milk is that we all have an expiration date. The problem is you don't know when the milk's going to go bad. So I want to give you guys my email. You know, I can only scratch the surface of understanding and teaching you multiple streams of income globally, how we can actually change the world. Being a truly being a thought leader, being a global world thought leader. I'm sitting at a table next week. It's the first time I'm leaving a convention, 25 years early, first time in my life. I decided to sit at a table with 40 people privately in a room, 7 figures to get into the seat. You know, I mean, and that's a drop in the bucket for these people. Deepak Chopra, you know, Robin Sharma, John Maxwell. There's like literally 40 of the greatest minds, and I'm the token, for those that understand that conversation, sitting in the room that, you know, amongst Richard Branson, who actually gave me the letter of introduction. And I'm so excited about understanding 2020. Do you know what 2020 is? That's called perfect sight. That's called vision. Vision stands for vision inspires success in others now. To be able to see what other people can't see. That's the word faith. To walk in faith and build what nobody else sees but already existed for the eye before it. See, when you look at someone like David, when the sculpture of David was put together and they asked him as an artist, this sculptor, this David, how did you see this? But God, how did you put this together? You know, how did you sculpt this sculpture called David to make the world see it? I mean, how did you have an envision for this? He said, I didn't create this. He said, what do you mean you didn't create it? Well, who created it? He said, no, it always existed. I just chipped away at it so you could see it. See, that's your life. That's my life. That's our life. Greatness, extraordinary, magnificent, remarkable, outstanding, beautiful. You don't have to lose weight. You don't have to gain weight. You don't need no Botox. You don't need no tweeds. You don't even need makeup. You're beautiful just the way you are. If you like to reach me and you like to understand exactly how I transform lives and how I actually make a difference in people's lives, it's very simple. My name is Byron Nelson. I want you to say it in your head while you're on this screen. Just say Byron Nelson. Go ahead, say it in your head again, because you will never meet me and ever be. You ever meet somebody before and then somebody comes and says, do you know such and such? You're like, oh, the name sounds familiar. I don't know. Could you? No, see. I want you guys to take this one last note home with you, that if you don't take anything else ever in your life from me, you remember this one thing. You're beautiful, so beautiful that it makes you unforgettable, but it is your job to make yourself unforgettable in the minds of others. My name is Byron Nelson. Write it down, say it in your head. You will never meet somebody and say, have you ever met this guy named Byron Nelson? No, it's the tall black man, 6'4", crazy, who transforms lives. That's who I am. I bring the greatness out of you that you can't see. There's a guy, I'm sorry, I know I'm a Baptist preacher. I was done about 20 minutes ago, but I gotta tell you this one story. There was a guy, it's a short story, and they all stood in line. They all stood in line, and it was a rich neighborhood. And they all had their trumpets and they wanted to get on the band, and everybody laughed at the kid that kept being pushed to the back of the line, pushed to the back of the line. He kept getting pushed to the back of the line, and they all had shiny horns. He was you could tell he was in secondhand clothes. He was dirty, he was dingy, he was fat, and everybody they didn't understand the beauty in this man. You would think you would have to wait years to hear from who this man was. And he stood back and they're like, you're never gonna get on the team. You're never gonna get on the band. Look at how you gonna play with that old beat up. He didn't have enough money to get a new horn. I mean, it was all rusty and literally, I mean, it was just jagged. It's just ridiculous. And everybody played. And then when it was his time to go up, even the school looked at him and the people looked at him and was like, all right, if we must listen to you, come on up here and, play us a song. This is the tryouts for the band. See, each one of us was that kid with that beat up horn where he almost walked away and he was crying. But he said, you know what? I'm not going to let them run me away. And he picked up that horn and it was all bent up. I don't even know how any sound came out of it. He started to blow on the horn and it sounded really scratchy because it had stuff backed up in it. He hit it on the ground, picked it up again, started to blow it. And when he finally got it cleared out and he started blowing, nobody could touch this man. Everybody stood in awe. They're like, how does he play like that? How did he make that horn make music like that? My God, everybody was mentally messed up. You know who that guy was? His name was Dizzy Gillespie. If you don't know the name, look him up. And he became one of the most renowned jazz artists in the history of mankind. He almost lost and gave up on his dream because he listened and bought into the opinions of others. Don't let anyone, ever, ever, ever steal your dream. Dance to your own tune. My email is Mr. as in MR dot Byron Nelson @gmail.com. I'm easy to find. They said, well, where do you live? On the globe called planet Earth. I am easy to find. I want to thank you, Mr. Al Thomas, for having me on this call. I love you. I'm going to see you in less than a couple of weeks. And I adore you and I appreciate and really love what you're doing with this. I hope that we can continue this, build something on this, that we can take this into the year 2020 and make a difference in millions of lives so we have more voices that people can hear. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. I thank you, Mr. Nelson, for sharing, and hang out with Richard Branson and my dear, Les Brown. I mean, we just go on and on and on. But folks, I just wanted to bring a segment to you of Mr. Byron Nelson and let you see him up close, peel the onion back, who and where he's from, who is he, what made him who he is, what made him stamp and put a global footprint on the world for others to see. Not only that, but encouragement. See, that's what leaders do. We're here to encourage people. If we can do it, you can do it. He here from his humble beginnings to where he was, where he started, but also he remember.
Is it just me, or did he just freeze in time? See, that's how powerful this man is. He can actually stop time. He can stop time. He can talk and freeze time. That's how powerful my Al Thomas is. He just, oh!
Well, listen, Mr. Nelson, thank you once again. I know you guys got a big event you're doing there down in Monterey. Ms.
Yeah.
Jocelyn Driscoll, thank you, and all the people down there. God bless you. Hey, folks around the world that are listening in, I see people from all over the place listening in. And I want to thank you for tonight. And I hope you get a hold of him to find out exactly what he's doing, be a part of that, and also be a changer, a global changer. 2020 is right upon us. You know, it doesn't start in 2020. It starts tonight. Tonight, It starts your 2020. By the time 2020 gets, it's almost gone. So start it now. And it starts right here in the mind. And like he says, to conduct the band, you must turn your back to the audience. Yes. God bless everybody. Good night.
Yes. Love you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
100%.
Wow.